started. So welcome and greetings. I'm Lisa Bueller. I'll be your facilitator today. We're going to be going over the current year budget and the reconciliation of that and talking about there was some good news with all of that in that there was actually a little bit of a balance left. So that's not something that always happens with budgets. We'll talk a little bit about that. There'll be a review of the GSP update scope and budget. And I know I received a couple of emails about that, so there will be some questions about that. Then we'll hear a little bit about where we think we are this year with the water trends, which will give us a preview for what will be happening with the annual report. Mike Wegman will be giving us an update on project management actions, where things are. And then I don't know, Mike, if you want to just mention during that where you're at with the annexation as well. Then we'll be hearing from Oster Miller. He's going to talk a little bit about what they've been doing with the SB 552, which is the drought task force work. And that just kind of how we're seeing that being integrated with what's going on right now with your process. We've got Suzanne Petchy and Mark Streeters to give a quick report on their meeting, on the Domestic Well Advisory Committee meeting. Then we'll hear from a couple of the GSAs in terms of what they've been doing with their interbasin coordination updates and next meeting, action items, and out the door. So with that, we've got a pretty big meeting. I think we can probably jump into the presentation, and I'll go ahead and run it. It's always a little bit of a problem for me to do that because I can't see everybody when we're doing that. I do have a note taker today, and the note taker is also having internet problems, so she is joining by phone. So let me stop the share and start a new one. And for those of you who are not regular members, this is the members of our group, and I'll just take a second to let people self-introduce. So Eric, do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Eric Ringelberg. I'm the executive and administrator for the Northern Delta Groundwater Sustainability Agency, a joint powers agreement of 7 agencies in the Northern Delta.
Okay, thank you. Mark Streeters?
Yeah, I'm Mark Streeters. I'm a board member with Oklahoma Chimney Hartnell Water District, which is basically in the, you should call it the southeastern portion of the GSP. My other partner, Ken, I do not believe is online today, so I'm not.
Yeah, I don't see him.
Can't speak for him.
Yeah, and you do have Mike here with you as well.
Yes, I have Mike also.
Very good. Herb, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you can hear me, right?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. Well, Herb Garms, chair of the Sluhouse RCD. We represent the area from Rancho Marietta just up to the off-road vehicle park below the Folsom city limits. Thank you.
Thank you. Dahlia?
Yes, hi, Dalia Fado, City Rancho Cordova, currently serving as chair of the SCGA board.
Thank you. Barbara?
Barbara Evoy, I sit on the SCGA board as well as Dahlia and Paul and Bruce.
Thank you. Paul?
Hi, I'm sorry, a little lag in the buttons here. Paul Schubert, I'm at the SCGA.
Thank you. And Bruce, I know you're on your phone. Did you want to add anything else?
No, Bruce Camillos, Vice Chair of the Sacramento Central Groundwater Authority and also General Manager of the Oak Grove Water District.
And thank you, by the way, Bruce hosted our Domestic Well Advisory Group meeting, so thank you to Bruce.
You're welcome.
All right. And I see we've got Carrie Schmidt online. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Carrie Schmitz with Sacramento County Department of Water Resources. I'm driving, so I'm a bit of a hazard right now, so I'm going to go ahead and go on mute.
Good idea. And we'll take Chris Hundley also.
Good afternoon, Chris Hunley with Sacramento County Department of Water Resources.
Thank you. All right, with that, why don't we jump into the budget discussion? And I will make this as large as I can. Is this
This
big enough?
Todd Ising with City of Folsom and SCGA.
Oh.
Also, that's okay.
Oh, Todd, you snuck in on me. Okay.
And Carrie's always a hazard, so whatever. You know.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I didn't see you pop in. Thank you so much. All right. Let's go ahead then. John, I'm going to turn this over to you to go over the budget and accounting for this last year that's just ended, and then kind of we'll talk a little bit about the balance that's left and where you want to go with that, your proposal for next year.
All right, thanks, Lisa. So as you all remember, we appointed this executive committee when we developed a new MOU for Sigma implementation after we submitted the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. And the first 2 years of that, we had this budget of $225,000. Various things included there. Probably the biggest single line item is producing the annual report that we're required to do every year. So for last fiscal year, 23-24, we kept that $225,000 budget number. And those, Lisa, if you go to the next slide.
Going there right now.
So then in the MOU, we came out with this distribution of the percentages of the total cost between the 5 GSAs that are represented here. And then on the right side is the amount of the share of that 225,000. Those amounts were billed by SCGA to each GSA actually late last fiscal year. And then if you go to the next slide. Okay, and then at the end of the fiscal year, when the county closed the books, we got all the consultant invoices in. Our total expenditures for the year were $192,000. So we were a little over $32,000 under that $225,000 that was agreed to in the budget. So as a result of that, we have the credit amounts that you see there. And I think one thing we want to discuss today is how do we handle that credit? Do we reduce that off of next year's budget, or do we hold it for a future year budget? And if you go to the next slide, the GSA managers met last month and are recommending, again, a $225,000 budget. And I'm sorry, the last line should be July 1, 2024 to June 30, 2025 for actually our third year budget. The total 225,000 is the same. The numbers have shifted around some. The annual report number, we've reduced some. And I think being more efficient in the annual report is actually where we saw some of that savings last year. And then we've added a line item for scoping and some of the preliminary work for the GSP 5-year evaluation that we'll go into next year. So although the budget total again is $225,000, we could reduce those payments by the amount of those credits, or hold those credits, because we'll talk further about the projected budget for 25-26, which will be the GSP update, which will be considerably more money and considerably larger workload there. So yeah, I guess you can go to the next slide, Lisa, and we can have those discussions.
Very good. Thank you, John. So I'm going to start with Herb. I know you had some ideas about the credit amount and kind of what the disposition should be. Would you like to start?
Sure, I'll start. I shared with you that, so John, am I understanding that it's $32,000? I didn't know how much the credit was. Is that what's left over?
Yeah, the total is 32,000. So, for example, Slough House is 1,198 of
Well,
credit from the last fiscal year.
so SCGA is the largest contributor. And so my overall thought is there's no reason to credit it back to each entity, and that maybe you should consider leaving that on the books so it can be added to the 5-year, whatever that contribution is going to be. And do you predict more savings next year or this coming year and the following year before the 5-year? And what I've never heard is exactly how big is this 5-year update going to be, but my understanding is it shouldn't be that big.
Well, yeah, and that's something we're going to talk about in the next agenda item. It'll be significant, and it'll be you'll see an initial estimate is 900,000. I think that number has some areas we can reduce it and reduce the workload, but it'll be 2 to 3 times our 225,000 budget that we've seen the last few years. And again, that'll be coming up next fiscal year, 25, 26, that we're going to do that work because we have to submit the update and the evaluation in January of 27. So that'll give us, really next fiscal year to do the work. And then the process of adoption of the changes and whatnot will have that 6 months lag.
All right.
Chris Hunley.
Trigger finger slow this afternoon. Just wanted to ride on Herb's coattails. County also supports leaving these extra funds on the books. Makes sense to roll it over. I mean, we've already collected. And then looking forward to hearing about the 5-year update or the GSP plan amendment. I know our neighbors up north, John, I don't recall, is it like 1.5 that they budgeted for that? It's just, it's going to be spendy.
Yeah. And then they budgeted that, recognizing that they had a significant grant to help do that. So
for sure.
I know that North Delta also had been leaning towards just keeping it on the books. Eric, was there anything else that you wanted to say about that?
No, as long as you don't run into any sort of accounting problems, keeping it on the books would be helpful, just to decrease the cost at a future point. So we're good with it.
And John, you had indicated to me that you were comfortable either direction. So let me just check with Mark Streeters. Do you have an opinion about this, Mark?
No, I would agree. Probably keep it on the books. It's that much less administrative cost to fuss around with it. Keep track of it and add it on to what we're going to ultimately be dealing with come the re-up of the whole system 2 years from now.
Yeah, Lisa, I mean, as far as the accounting, we're not handling this as a separate fund in SCGA and putting the money there and spending out of it. It's all embedded in our SCGA budget that the county manages. So the specific accounting for this sub-basin wide work is about as detailed as this slide you're seeing here. So not a big deal to maintain that number and track it into the next year. I know initially, we talked about building a reserve fund for the GSP update, and I think everybody's feeling was, well, each agency will just hold on to their own money until the time comes, rather than build a reserve fund. So now we're looking a little differently now. We're gonna carry this over and have a reserve.
But John, Mike Wakeman here. Were we carrying over until the update or just until next year?
Well, I think,
Because
well,
we're going to update 24, 25. I mean, we're going to start on some of that work in 24, 25. So,
yeah, but the heart of the work and the budget, the item we'll talk about next, the scope, and then the budget for that is something we'll need to get approved before the beginning of fiscal year 25, 26, so July 1st. So, yeah, I mean, if we wanted to use it this year, we'd essentially not be carrying it over. We just approve the budget, but bill reduced amounts, right?
right.
As opposed to, Lisa, if you'll back up. No, I think this works. We could, so for this year's budget, assuming the executive committee approves the current fiscal year 24, 25 budget of 225,000, we can either bill these amounts in the left-hand column, 168, 29, 250, etc., or we can bill the amounts with that amount less the credit. The other alternative is hold off until we figure out what the 25-26 budget will be and apply this credit to that future fiscal year.
Okay. So Barbara?
So I don't know where you want to put this, Lisa. So I know that we're talking about the credit, and so it sounds like we've heard from, I think, all the major players. But I did want to just spend a little bit of time on the proposed budget for this next year.
So we'll go ahead. The proposed budget for this next year is the same dollar amount, and then we can go and look at the line items. So
yeah, because we have so in order to be able to bill for this, we do need the executive committee to approve this the current year 24-25 budget.
Yeah.
So on 24-25, so my questions really revolve around, are we putting everything into the 5-year GSP update, or should we be front loading some of those events this current year with expenditures appropriate to that in order to be better aligned for the 5-year GSP work?
I think so. John, I'll go ahead and go to the proposed budget because you have set aside money coming year to start working on the 5-year plan. And then we can come back. We can come back to this. We will need to resolve it before the meeting's over, but let's take a look at this. So right now that there was the general impression that it would be good to carry over the funds to to hold them for use for the 25-26 GSP update. And so the question that's in front of us right now is there work relative to the GSP 5-year update that will start in the coming year? So the budget for that is now up on the screen. And as you can see, they have set aside in this budget 20,000 to start the pre-work. So John, would you like to go through the rest of this budget?
Yeah. And again, a lot of these are what we've seen in the past. The annual report number, I think, was reduced a little bit from prior years. I think we've kind of streamlined the process and able to do that a little bit lower. The data management system is ongoing work. There's potentially some new data we'll add. We'll have to figure out where the voluntary monitoring program of domestic wells, if any of that data goes into the DMS. A lot of the contract administration and accounting is largely county time. Basin administration, again, county and GEI costs. We never have put a line item in for legal costs, and unfortunately we haven't needed that. We now have Omachumney Hartnell managing the website, so the overall cost there has reduced, and we've got just outreach costs in there. I think we probably do need some outreach work, public outreach work prior to the year we start the update in earnest. interbasin coordination, a relatively small number, and that's a place we will have some discussion about the surrounding basins and their plans for their 5-year updates. We've already had some coordination on the modeling work. Monitoring coordination hasn't really changed in the cost there. We've got some very limited dollars for model updates, and a lot of that is model updates related to the annual report. Work on the domestic well program will continue, and then we've got a line item that's really the new item between the 3 consultants, just for some of the work to develop the scope of work, develop budgets, and be ready to propose that and get that work started immediately after the beginning of the next fiscal year. So we did try to keep it at the same budget, but the items have shifted around a little bit. Yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, John, as you know, I've been tracking the DWR guidance that came out on interconnected surface water. And so we've been waiting for that for quite a bit of time. And there appears to be some work that needs to be done to start to address. I realize it's still in draft and they're taking comments, I think, as we speak. But I just wondered if, rather than have so many moving parts all in the same timeframe for the 5-year GSP update, if there wasn't work that has been indicated that we didn't have on our plate before that we should be starting work on now.
Yeah, when we look at the initial proposal for the update budget for 25-26, we've got that work in there. I think a lot of the work to respond to those guidance documents is additional modeling work. And they're accepting comments. They'll finalize that. They're saying they're going to come out with a 4th document that really is guidance around, okay, so now how do we take this assessment and translate it to sustainable management criteria? So I think we probably won't know the final answer from DWR on what they're looking for till early next year, the spring of next year. So question is there work we can confidently start on without really knowing their final position?
Go ahead, Barbara.
I think the webinar I just looked at talked about having the 4th piece of guidance this winter. But we know that often those things do slip.
Yeah. And this winter goes till March 20th.
Right. I got the impression before January, but we'll see what happens there. So along those lines, also was going to ask about the 25-26 budget. I wanted to get a feeling for what new information is coming in that needs to be included in the data management system. You mentioned some of the new domestic well information, but I assume there's other things that have come in. I just was trying to get an idea of what's new in the last several years that needs to be incorporated into the 5-year update. What more have we done that has advanced our understanding of the basin?
Well, mostly it's the water level monitoring from our representative monitoring network. We've got some potential understanding of things we could make improvements to the model, and we'll talk about that when we look at that scope. And then we're also, under DWR's direction on the review of our plan, required now to be monitoring and reporting arsenic in our water quality monitoring network. So, we'll not only for our current monitoring network start incorporating arsenic, and then I think we'll probably incorporate more monitoring in the harvest water area for water quality as we go forward as well. So I think some water quality, but really just the 5 years of water levels are the other primary data set that we have.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here real quick because we are going to do a deeper dive into the GSP update scope and budget. Before we move to that, I would really like to get closure on the budget item for the current year. So what we need to do is decide we've got a sense of where it is that we're going to be moving forward in terms of a proposal right now for the existing budget, the one that we had last year, the same physical amount, even though the tasks have changed a little bit. And then one of the proposals is for the credit that's currently available from this year's fund, that we carry that over and just retain it for the credit, retain it for the purpose of the 5-year update. The alternative to that would be to use it for the next year's, just a simple credit for the coming year. The predominance of the conversation so far was leaning to the 5-year update. So I do need to just get a feeling for where this group would like to go. We do need a decision on that. So Paul, I do see you have a hand up. I'll go ahead and take your hand, and then we'll kind of try to move into getting some closure on that item.
Well, I was going to ask, I mean, are you looking for a motion? I think I asked this our last executive committee meeting, how we approach things like this and the structure. Is it a motion and a second and all in favor? But as far as a budget, I move to approve if that's what you're looking for. And as far as the carryover savings from last year, I mean, that's administrative. I mean, if all the parties are good with SCGA holding the money for whether this be the 2024, 25, or the really the 25 update, to me it's the same net effect. So I'm not sure I'm ready to opine one way or the other on that, but I would like to say yes, we approve the budget, and then we could ask John and raise a show of hands of far as is there easier one way or the other as far as where you apply the money to on the next bit.
Well, thank you, Paul. That's exactly what I needed, was a motion for that. So right now, to the members, the motion that's on the table is to go ahead and approve the budget. So we're talking about the one that's just concluded. And then in your motion, are you also including the future coming year, the 24-25 budget, Paul, or is that separate?
No, that's what moving to approve. Yes, the budget, both including one which is money's already spent. I mean, that one was already money was spent as approved in the prior year, but this is the proposed budget for 24-25 to approve that budget. And then again, I would actually make the motion to each of the executive directors of the GSAs decide how they want that remnants applied, whether it be out of the 24-25 or the 25 GSP update.
Very good. Thank you. So that's the motion. Are there any questions or discussion about the motion? All right. With that, then I'll just ask, we can go ahead and do a show of hands. So if you are a member of the group, if you are in favor of the motion as Paul has proposed, if you would just raise your hand.
Lisa, this is Bruce Camillus. I'm driving. I'm going to vote in favor of the motion and to carry over into the 5-year plan.
Very good. All right. And
I agree.
it looks like we have agreement.
Yeah, and then I think, based on Paul's motion, I think that leaves the option open, Mike, if you want to offset this year's payment from your credit, we can do that. Because again, Paul kind of pushed it to the GSA manager level to determine that, which I think works fine.
Very good. Okay. Thank you to everyone that's raised your hand. So we'll just note, I do have this for the record. We've got Barbara Herb and Bruce, Mark Streeters. Let's see, I think I saw the county. Eric has also voted in favor. And I think also I need is Mark Streeters. Do I have an eye from you, Mark?
Did, yes. It didn't come through.
Yeah, thank you. All right, very good. So that motion is passed. Thank you for letting me close that item. And then we can go ahead and start jumping into the next item. So the next item is the preview of the GSP update. This was a fairly detailed, I have sent meeting packets to everyone that pre-registered. So what I'll do, we'll just kind of start out with a high level, and then I will switch over to the actual handout so you can see the detail. So do you want to just, this was kind of the top of the line, John? Do you want to?
Yeah, and I think in the GSA managers meetings and I think in the last executive committee meeting we had in the spring, I think there was consensus that we should maintain the consulting team that we had for the GSP and figure out the scope and do sole source contracts to that team to carry out this work, rather than doing a new RFP for GSP updates. So based on that, we got from each of the firms, and full disclosure, one of those is GI, which is also my firm, but GI, Larry Walker Associates, Woodard & Kern, who did the work. I asked for a scope and a budget for what they envisioned needed to be done for the GSP update and what they envisioned their piece of that would be based on how we broke out the work last time. And these are the numbers that we got back, just shy of 900,000. And you'll see the biggest items are the two. Okay, you're going to shift to the detailed budget.
We lost her.
Okay. I don't know if anybody can see that, Lisa. It's sure too small for me to see, but
Yeah, I'll need a lot more magnification.
now it's sideways. But yeah, I mean, if you can blow it up, and then we can scroll down through it. So beginning at the top, there's project management as a task for each firm. We want to use the airborne geophysical data that DWR collected, and at least evaluate that primarily along the east side of the subbasin in the non-developed areas is where they did that work, and probably develop some new cross sections. I think DWR probably expects us to at least take a look at that data and see if we get value from it. So not a major effort, but at least a first cut at how much it changes our concept of the hydrogeology. There's an effort to add new information and summarize information we've seen. So summarize the groundwater levels and water quality that we've seen over the last 5 years of annual reports, report on any changes in land and water use, at least summarize some of the work that's gone on a regional basis around climate change. And then this GSA's authorities and enforcement actions is a topic that's identified in the DWR guidance on 5-year evaluations, but again, pretty small amount we put there. Barbie, you have a question?
I do. Sorry, I'm working slower than your brain. The AEM data from DWR, that is subsurface data, or is that crop data?
Oh, it's subsurface data. It's airborne electromagnetics.
Okay, so that's giving you new cross sections. And so I would be curious at some time to have a dialogue on how accurate that is versus, pump tests and other kinds of more traditional methods, because I don't think I'm very familiar at all with the AEM. And then when you have the regional characterization of climate change, I mean, this issue's been a big issue for the water forum. So I was just kind of curious how you were going to focus, or what types of analysis you were going to do, whether you're using the American River Basin study or what kind of thing, since that's been a fairly charged issue as to what kind of scenario you use for that.
Yeah, I think it primarily is the American River Basin study is the most robust source of that climate analysis. I don't think we're going to do any original work on climate change for the GSP update.
Okay, because I'm sure various groups would. Some would push for the hotter, drier scenario, and some would push for more of the median. So I just wanted to mark that as a potentially controversial topic.
Yeah, and then as we get down into some of the modeling work, we can talk about, are there, how many modeling scenarios do we run around climate change? So it's one thing to report on the characterization, then next question is, so how do we then use it?
Thanks.
So, yeah.
I'll make a quick note, John. So on the AEM data, if there's an interest in that, I can pull together a couple of things to send out to the group. Just some basic information from DWR, if that would be helpful. Would that be helpful, Barbara?
Thank you, Lisa. It would be.
Okay, very good. I'll take that as an action item.
So then the task 4 is really updates to the model, and the North American subbasin had I think they probably had 700,000 in their grant for model updates. So there are a lot of things they're doing that will give us some understanding of how these changes to the model really affect the outcomes. But with the AEM data, do we then update the model stratigraphy, and kind of push through any changes in hydrogeologic conceptual model into the numerical model? We don't currently have any representation of the slurry walls that were put in the American River levees in our model, which could have an impact on the modeling of interconnected surface water. There's some, and I think it would take Woodard and Kern to explain exactly how they think the managed wetlands riparian vegetation data could be updated. Some newly developed urban areas from the last time the model was updated, potential boundary condition changes, changes in demand and supply, add any new municipal remediation wells, and then validate and calibrate the model with these changes. So, overall, it's hard to know how significant some of these changes are going to be to the model, but it's a pretty big line item to do the work. Yeah, Barbara.
And then did this budget predate the ISW information, or is there a placeholder in there for that?
Yeah, that's down below it, really in the scenarios, as opposed to the model structure itself.
Okay, and
no,
then
the slurry walls are probably the one thing that would really have a significant impact along the American River in net depletion analysis.
Yeah, I truly hadn't thought about the slurry walls, so I'm really glad that somebody paid attention to that. That would be an important thing to know. And at some point, I would like to hear more about new information on wetlands and riparian vegetation, because as you know, the GDE study was, I believe, a one-time study, aerial, with a little bit of ground truth.
Yeah.
So it was very minimal for the first GSP. So if there's more information, I think certainly the environmental groups would like to know more about what's being used.
So then task 5 then is all the running scenarios with the updated model, assuming we do all this work to update the model. So that some of the same model runs we did for the GSP, model current conditions, projected conditions, skip it down to 5.7, projected conditions with climate change, and we can certainly talk about whether there's more than one climate scenario. 5.3 is really the new analysis, and the DWR guidance lays out a procedure whereby you run your baseline model, and then you run your baseline model without any pumping, and the difference of those two is surface water depletion. And the reasoning is that over the long term, any water that recharges into groundwater will ultimately discharge to surface water. So whether we're pumping and directly creating a gradient where water flows from the stream into the groundwater, or whether we're just intercepting groundwater that would otherwise flow to surface water, all of that adds up to depletion. It leads to the question, I think, of how much analysis do we need when their conclusion is that over a long period of time, your depletion is equal to your pumping. But I think minimally, they probably will expect that non-pumping scenario to be run. And then again, projects and management actions are projects and management actions likely won't change, but we'll have an updated model. So we'll need to rerun some of these scenarios. In my mind, Task 4 and Task 5, the model updates and all these scenarios, are a place where we can have a discussion about, do we need to put in this level of effort when we're only 5 years into our completion of our GSP, or can that wait till a future update? Barbara.
No, I certainly can understand that. I'm sorry, I was going to ask you a question on 6. Certainly 6.1 determine depths and screen intervals of water level wells. I mean, that's one of the things I thought might front loaded into this year's work. Certainly getting a handle on what our well system is seems really basic. And if you're going to be updating higher up on this list, the stratigraphy and the model update, it would seem like determine the depths and screen intervals of water level wells would be one of the initial activities.
Yeah, and you're right. And actually, we have 2 6.1s, but
oh yeah,
you're so the second 6.1, we're gonna try and do that this year. It's kind of a subset of our monitoring network that we don't have that information for. So the first step is just figuring out what it will take for each of those wells just to get access to get a camera down them and figure out depths and screen intervals, because we don't have drillers reports for those. So we'll at least know what the magnitude of the effort is, I think, by the end of this fiscal year.
Yeah, because I think everything in 6 I would consider to be a preface to the work that's being done. We should be looking at the subsidence. I mean, we have the comments on subsidence are not going to change. We know we need a long-term record on the consumness. It would seem like adding them earlier rather than later would be a better strategy than saying we just stuck it in, but we have no information. So
yeah, and the stream gauges were applying for a program DWR has for money for stream gauges, and again, that's another thing we could talk about. Do we do that? Do we do that whether or not we get some grant funding for that? So the numbers in here, but I think at least an initial thought is let's see if we get grant funding for it. But again, you're right. Some of that work we'll be working on this year. We'll capture it in an evaluation, and document it next year as we do the write-up. Herb.
Yeah, John. On that same vein, is this just one gauge on the river, multiple gauges?
Right, there's actually two spots on the Casumnas we identified in the GSP that we're working on, and really it's it's to try and get a better handle on understanding where the river's connected versus disconnected from groundwater.
So is it the upper, lower, middle?
It's
Where at?
lower. It's in
Lower?
the lower section, actually by Man's place down there. Her was one of the places we were looking at. We're still in the process of trying to get funding for that one. And then I believe John, if you remind me right, I think it's down by Twin Cities was another one, if I remember right.
Yeah,
But I know one.
off the top of my head, I don't recall, but it is.
Yeah, but I do know that one of them was right there at Tom's place.
Okay, so that's within, well, isn't there a stream gauge already by the Highway 99?
Yeah, that one's not rated, or and after they redid the freeway there, we sort of lost it. We're trying to get it rated and everything to determine how much was coming down through there. The one at Man's place, we were actually looking to put some, not only a gauge, but actually a shallow well to determine some of the, what is the depth right there in that area and stuff. So, yeah, so there's a couple, things on the books that if we can get funding for, we'd like to throw into that area. And then we're also looking at, for OHWD, we're looking at maybe some stream gauges along Deer Creek right there at Couch's place, where we have the recharge project, so we can determine at what stage would we expect the Deer Creek to overflow and how much water we're going to be getting that flowed over into our recharge project areas too. So we're looking for funding in that area too. So there's a couple different places we're looking to put some gauges in to get even more understanding than the ones we already have. We already have one at we call it Rooney Dam there. We have one down at Man Dam, but we keep losing them because the water keeps washing them out when we have these big floods.
Well, they get so high through there.
Yeah.
Anything stays there.
Yep.
So, okay. So the 75,000 is to study it or administrative or what? Is that, because that 75,000 will barely pay for one gauge. So is this just studying it and hoping to get grants? Is that what the idea is?
Yeah, I think this is the LWA proposal to install two, and again with grant funding.
Yeah, but I'm asking, is the 75,000 go towards the gauges or?
Yeah, no, I believe that's the proposal. Again.
Yeah, this is Olin Apple here with Larry Walker Associates. Yeah, that's correct. John,
Yeah.
You are correct. That is for the two gauges. And operation and maintenance, I think, is going to be covered under DWR's grant. We have that budgeted in there too.
So this might get credited back if you get the grants? No?
That's a good question. I think if we spend the money before we get the grants, we'll have a harder time getting recovery on that. So
Well,
again,
that's what I was asking. It doesn't cost $75,000 to designate a certain spot and then wait and see if you get the grant and then apply it. So that's why I was asking, when do you plan on using this money and how?
well, that's right. So at least the way I've conceived of it now, we put the 75,000 into the budget, but we would only spend it if we get it from grant funding.
Okay. So you won't put the cart in front of the horse?
No, unless the executive committee says that's critical, let's spend our own money on it. But I think again, we're 5 years in a basin that's that we've shown to be sustainable and with minimal potential impacts. So I think we have some leeway to push some things down the road a little bit.
Yeah, John, I'm just trying to ask the question and be frugal. That's what I'm
Oh,
asking.
sure. Yeah, yeah,
That's all.
yeah. So then, item 7, once we've done all this analysis, potentially other modeling scenarios, we need to reevaluate our sustainable management criteria and our minimum thresholds. We're required to report out on status of all our projects and management actions, which, it's not a significant budget, but there will, Harvest Water, for example, will have a lot of changes. By the time we submit this report, they should be delivering some water and actually have that to report on. And then the other big piece is actually write up the evaluation report and prepare amendments to the GSP. And the law requires an evaluation, a 5-year evaluation. It doesn't require an amended GSP. With some of the work we're going to do, I think it will result in changes to what we've written in the GSP. So there will be at least an addendum GSP that'll have to be adopted by the boards of all the GSAs. Again, a big chunk of this work is documenting the modeling work. So if we ramp down the modeling work, that would ramp down that middle section of some of the reporting work. And then finally, just budget for our outreach efforts during the update. But again, so that adds up to almost 900,000, I think, Lisa, at the bottom.
That's 898,500.
And so just looking from SCGA standpoint, which I have to manage. And we're covering 75% of these costs under our agreement. That's almost a $700,000 effort for 25-26. We still have at least part of the cost of our annual report and the other things we're doing annually. So pretty big number that I don't think SCGA is fully prepared to pay right now. I don't know about the other GSAs, and I don't want to speak for the SCGA board members that are on the executive committee.
Lisa, I'd like to make a comment. This is Bruce Camillus.
Yes, please, Bruce.
So, yeah, I took a look at that budget. It is a big number. And, if we had all the money in the world, I'd like to do everything we possibly could as well, but we don't. And so I guess I'm looking to thread the needle here to keep us compliant with DWR, do the right thing for the basin, but not go above and beyond for right now. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. I think what the GSA managers are looking for is give us some guidance, and then we can work with the consultants to refine this consistent with the guidance we get from executive committee.
It sounds like right now there's an interest from the group in making sure that we be as frugal as reasonable in this process. And so I guess is the group asking for the managers to kind of figure out where there's room in this budget, or what kind of guidance? Bruce, what are you thinking would be most helpful?
Well, when I did a little research before the meeting, I mean, it looks to me like the 5-year plan, as long as you're showing that you're meeting your measurable objectives, then that's very important. And so I don't know how much modeling work, how much has changed since we did the original model, how much we really need to put into modeling right now to make that case that we are meeting the measurable objectives. So again, I want to do the right thing, and I want to make sure that we're managing the basin properly and we don't get our hands slapped, but I want to be frugal with the money too.
I concur with you, Bruce. This is Herb.
Yeah. So John, understanding that the group is interested in looking at lean and mean, do you feel you have some direction, or what do you need?
Yeah, and I'd like to hear from other executive committee members. And I guess another thing to keep in mind, we've got if you hadn't heard, we have an election coming up in a couple of weeks, and there's a new climate resilience bond on the ballot. There's potentially some pretty significant funds for Sigma implementation. So, it may be we have another shot at some funding before we get out to our 10-year point to actually do some of these nice to have but not must have things.
So Mark Streeters?
I wanted a clarification, John. For the update, does that include, or do we have to do separately our annual report?
No, we
Are they two
we
separate
still have to
items
do
in the
our
same year, or
yeah we have to do our annual report in the same year we're doing this evaluation and update. And there's some overlap. We'd be evaluating that last year of data anyway as we go into the evaluation. So I think our annual report budget for next year would be lower than our 225.
Okay. But we do have to do two separate documents, basically. I just was kind of curious where that fit.
Yeah. Which, it's it doesn't have to make sense. It's the law.
Go ahead, Herb.
Oh, I'm okay. I just want to point out that on the CGA board, that right now we're earmarking $500,000, but we don't know if that's enough. So, but at the same time, we're hoping it doesn't escalate beyond $500,000. So that's why I'm kind of questioning almost $1 million, but it could, I'm just not sure. I thought South American was pretty much in compliance, and that's why I was agreeing with Bruce a little bit on going forward with being as frugal as possible. I just want to point that out. I would like is this going to be a final today, or is this something that's
No, you don't need to take action on this today. The goal that John was looking for some general direction from you, and previewing kind of what was on the table.
Okay.
Yeah, and it may be we need more than one more executive committee meeting this fiscal year, because we will have to take another cut at this, and I could envision we'd put a must do and an optional task budget together, but we've got to get to the point where the executive committee is good with the budget, and that means you got to get to a point where your home GSA is comfortable with your share of it.
Okay. As long as this is a document that's going to be reviewed again, great.
Eric?
Sure. It won't come as any surprise. Lean and mean is, I think, what my board has consistently given me direction on, and so I support what Herb and Bruce are saying. And I want to just remind folks that this is not a rewriting of the GSP. It's identification of the defects of the ISWs that we didn't have direction on before, and an update in areas where we had some significant problems. And I think actually the consulting team has done an excellent job of daylighting those things up front in the original GSP, and I appreciate John's cost control efforts today. So,
thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I think John's already said it. Actually, if we could have a budget where it's like, these are things that we need to meet the law and the requirement, and then here's a column for aspirational things that we're going to seek grant funding for. So that's what I'd like to see.
All right. So I think, based on this input, I think we'll get the GSA managers together, to the extent everybody wants to and can participate with the 3 consulting teams, and we'll just really hit at, what do you think we really have to do to maintain compliance from DWR versus what should we plan for and hope to fund before we get 5 more years out?
Thank you, John. So we did spend a little bit more time on this item than I had originally anticipated. Why, I'm going to just kind of scroll up really quickly and take a look at our agenda, understanding that we've got maybe a bit tighter agenda than we had originally anticipated. So we've already taken care of items 1 through 5. And Austin, I think probably the thing that's going to be, if you don't mind, I'd like to move the alignment with SB 552 to the end of the agenda. And that way, if we're running tight on time, we can get some of the other things resolved first. Is that all right with you, Austin?
Sure thing.
Okay, very good. So let's on the next item then is item 6. Mike, that's for you to talk about project management actions, and you had some updates on a couple of things. You started a little bit on harvest water.
Yeah, just, I mean, our 2 big projects within this basin, and our biggest one, of course, is Harvest Water. Harvest Water project is under construction. I can tell you that because I have to drive through it every morning getting out of my house. So it is being built and it is moving forward. And it looks like it, and talking with the Harvest Water group, that they're on schedule for that. So that is probably, our biggest one that you're looking to bring a 30,000 acre feet into the region. OHWD project, we're still operating and they're still ongoing. We operated them last year. We put about 700 acre feet into the ground on a groundwater recharge projects. Hopefully we're able to put more in this year as things go along. So those are moving forward those are 2 big project management actions. The other one is the regional conjunctive use. I really don't have an update on that. Not been involved in that one too much. I don't know if John has any update on the regional conjunctive use project as we move forward. So those are the 3 big ones that are moving forward in this basin.
Yeah, I don't have anything, and I don't know, maybe Paul or Bruce, you want to weigh in, but I'm not aware of any significant new facilities that have gone in to expand the conjunctive use program. Of course, the water bank concept is moving.
Right. We have the water bank concept out there that is going forward, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add on that. We're working on the water bank.
Yeah, the only thing I have to add is we're upgrading a couple interconnections with the Sac County Water Agency to facilitate movement of water across their boundaries there.
Okay. So that's all I have, Lisa, unless there's any other questions.
Great. Go ahead, Barbara.
So one of the things I would like to know, if not this meeting, then perhaps the next one, is as we're doing scenarios, exactly how we're going to overlay the water bank proposals. I realize that they're not far enough along at this point to do the scenarios, but they do have a grant that I presume they'll be doing a lot more modeling, and that we would know more about the basin parameters from that work. But I'd also like to know how the water bank scenarios will interfere or improve the conditions in our basin.
I think we all have quite a few questions about the water bank, Barbara, including OHWD, of how it's going to work, where it's going to go, how the Harvest Water Project is going to be, affecting it, and how you account for everything. So,
right. So I just want to make sure we get a chance to talk through this.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Go ahead, Mark.
One of the things that I would like to see the whole agency consider is the new lake that was created about 2.5 years ago when we flooded out Triangle gravel up on the Sunrise and Florin into the world. It seemed to definitely assist in maintaining some of the groundwater levels around there as it perked back in on the 2 to 3 layers that I observed that they had carved through gravel down into hardpan layers. So I kind of like to see if there's some way we can work something into the to the whole scheme there of potentially maybe making that a lake on a permanent basis. It would supply, down gradient flows to the whole the northeastern to the west side of the Cosumnes River and to the backside of Rancho Cordova there. So just as a thought.
I'll tell you what, you'd make Tom Nelson's day if we could make that happen. He's been working on that for 20 years.
Yeah, I think so. But functionally, I think it might be a good idea as one of the things we did as a project consideration down the line here. Doesn't have to happen soon, but it's like a lot of things that it takes years to get them lined up to go. But it might be something to put on the books just to work toward. Thank you.
Yeah, is Carrie Schmidt still on?
Yes, go ahead, Carrie.
Carrie, didn't the county do a feasibility study on that Triangle Rock property as a recharge location at one point?
And Carrie's still on mute. There we go.
Sorry, I lost my sound for a little while, so I have no idea what question you just asked me.
So Mark Streeters was talking about the Triangle Rock gravel pit and using that for recharge. And I thought that the county at one point had done a feasibility study of that.
We did years ago. We had some grant money left over from something, so we did recharge feasibility. And I don't remember the study super clearly, although I think I shared it with Bruce not long ago. I believe that the soil conditions in that area were not great for recharge, is my recollection. But I would have to look at the study.
Yeah, we could at least probably dust that off and and take a new look.
Okay, I'll put that down as an action item. I hate that when that happens. All right, let's go. Okay, anybody else want to weigh in on this one? Okay.
There is a comment in the chat from Suzanne about some questions.
Oh, thank you. I can't see the chat, unfortunately, because I'm sharing my screen. So let me look. Thank you for letting me know that. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead and raise your hand, Suzanne.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I had it raised. It was probably at the very, very end.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I just can't see the chat because I'm sharing my screen. Go ahead.
Well, I just had a question on the budget item. What was it, 6? With regard to the domestic well monitoring group, I guess. And is it being coordinated through and the $20,000 that's funded for it? And is there a coordination then with that group, with EMD, with the Environmental Management District of the county? That wasn't, is that the $20,000 that was that was the budget item on it? Yeah.
On that item. Do you know what she's referring to, John?
Yeah.
I can go back to it if.
It's just a question on the coordination of the well monitoring group with EMD. So I guess just for clarification then, is the well monitoring committee coordinating with the county? There's a $20,000 budget item in there.
I don't know that the well monitoring committee is coordinating with the county in any way. SCGA is trying to get the water level data so we can better understand it, and then think about whether we should add some of those wells where they might be suitable to our representative monitoring network. The coordination with the EMD, I actually had a conversation with Chris Hundley this morning about that, and they're receptive, I guess, to the idea. Chris, correct me if I say anything wrong. They're receptive to the idea of some kind of consultation on new domestic wells, consultation with the GSA to make sure people understand the water levels in their area, how deep they should drill their well. But until I think EMD, until the state updates their model well ordinance, and then the county can update its well permitting ordinance, they don't want to make any changes until that point to actually add anything new. So we're still working on that, but it's probably it's a couple of years out before we actually add something to the well ordinance to have that coordination.
And then I just had one other comment on Herb Garm's comment on not paying for items that we're looking for grant funding for in advance of receiving a grant and then losing the opportunity for the grant. I agree with that, and I'm part of the state task force, and that's all they're talking about is no more grant funding and the lack of grant, and everything seems to be riding now on the voters to approve
Yeah.
a ballot measure. So, I think maybe looking at the budget in a different way. I mean, all of these items are plugged in for future, and maybe there would be grant funding for them in the future where they wouldn't be assessed, to the GSAs.
Yeah, and the last round of SIGMA implementation grants that DWR had, I think they basically had $4 of requests for every dollar that they had available. So, they know there's a lot of work out there that people wanted and needed to do that didn't get done as we head into these 5-year evaluations. So, I think there's probably got to be a little bit of leeway on the expectations of
Right.
what's in these 5-year plans.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Suzanne. All right. Any other questions on this item? Let's go ahead then and move to the next item. So, and this, Suzanne, it's actually coming back to you. We're going to go to the Domestic Well Advisory Committee. So you and Mark, and just any remarks that you'd like to make to recap things that were covered in the October 15 meeting.
So probably my best recap is the fact that I am on the state drought committee, the task force, and that we just finished the approval of this round of recommendations, and that my recommendation for community monitoring networks was unanimously approved by the entire task force. There were a few that had not been for it in the beginning, and so I think it's a very good goal for the committee to facilitate, and so there will be a white paper that will be coming out probably at the first of the year that I can probably share with everybody. All the recommendations made it through, and I don't know if Austin's going to talk about SB 552, but there was a lot of talk about the development of a drought dashboard in order to really hone in on the prediction of extreme weather events and drought and floods. And then we talked about next year's work, which will be interesting because it will be nature-based solutions for groundwater management, as well as looking at land use. So we had a big discussion, and we'll have to continue the discussion at the next meeting. There seems to be an overwhelming desire to add infrastructure to both of those, infrastructure for nature-based solutions and infrastructure for land use development. So next year should be an interesting year with some new projects, but I'll send the white paper out when it is ready for the public. And also, we talked about in a domestic well advisory group, the implementation, working with the county to implement SB 552. It is the county's jurisdiction to implement the legislation. So it's just the preliminary conversation about what we may do, how we might be involved to work with the greater domestic well community.
Great. I'm going to call on Mark in a second. Go ahead, Chris. You had a question?
Thank you. Suzanne, could you tell me the name of that white paper again? My phone cut out and I didn't hear the full description on the well effort you were talking about.
So I can send you more of the information on the group, but the group actually worked with 7 different recommendations this year, and a few of them were put together because they were so similar in nature. So the domestic well monitoring network was a standalone program, and staff really helped me a lot in developing a pilot study with projected costs and for the engagement of the public, the creation of a dashboard, and how the data would be used. So I don't know if I can send it to you yet, but when the white paper is out, everything will be developed by staff. And then that white paper will go to the legislature for implementation, for their review, and hopefully to implement some of the suggestions of the DRIP task force. Does that
Thank
answer?
you. It
Yeah.
does. Thank you so much.
I'll send you a copy as soon as it's available.
Perfect.
We'll go ahead, Suzanne, and distribute it to the full group. So that'll be great. Mark, go ahead.
Okay. Well, we kind of covered about 7 items, and we've kind of hit on most of what's going on here. I did want to report back that the domestic well monitoring group has begun measurements basically along the Grant Line and the Sheldon corridor. I finished mine, and we're proceeding to move kind of down the basin area there. Well levels in general are about the same as last year. My well dropped 4 feet, but that's up 4 feet from the previous year at this time. So that's good. We also determined there's a new perch layer a little bit north of me along Jackson Road. They sit what I thought was in the same groundwater level or same groundwater aquifer. Turns out they don't. They're about 20 feet higher, and she actually gained 2 foot this year during the summer. So the timing is different for each one of the different, layers we have. One of the big things I thought that came out of our meeting was a discussion about a newsletter. We're talking about doing I guess you call it semi-annual, twice a year type of newsletter to kind of let the information out to people that are interested in what's going on with regard with well monitoring and well protection within the South American Basin. We also talked about doing some outreach to new owners, kind of to help them understand through this letter, basically of what they need, what they might need to know about their well. A lot of people buy property and don't quite understand what they bought, got themselves into until they have a problem. So the idea would be that we kind of advise them as to where they can seek information from the department or from well drillers or whatever else, what else they might need to know about if they're starting to look at property, what they might consider before they jump in and buy the property. You need to know a little bit of information about your well, okay? Also, in connection with that, some discussion on water quality testing, availability, where we can have that done. Different areas of the basin have different impacts. One of the big ones that's come up, as John mentioned, was the fact that they're now looking for arsenic. In the northeastern sector up here, we look out on occasion to see what's happening with the county dump and recycle areas, to whether they're maintaining the good stuff in their own boundaries, so to speak. I think that about does it. The last points on this thing were the next steps, and we're looking at with coordinating with voluntary monitoring programs to kind of expand into the area, get some additional wells potentially. In fact, Lisa just sent me a note today about one of the people that was just on as an interested party about trying to get his well, incorporated into the domestic monitoring group. And then to kind of get some, discussions going between various entities in the domestic well owners group, so to speak. I think that pretty much covers kind of the new and different things. Oh, I should mention that according to records, and John didn't mention this, but he brought it up in our meeting, that basically Sacramento County did not have any new wells that went dry this year, at least none that were recorded. That's not to say there weren't a couple, because not everyone realizes you get on the DWR site and identify that your well went dry, but there were none there. And we have primarily 3 areas in the county, not just SB, but in the county, that are kind of concern, that being the area that's south of Folsom, and kind of north, I guess, or east of Sunrise. We have an area that's kind of to the west of the city of Sacramento out there. And we have, of course, in the lower portion of the county, we have the Gulf area, which has been experiencing some problems, and has the biggest probably drawdown of the area right now. So I think that about covers it.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions to Mark or Suzanne?
I had a question.
Go ahead.
So in the domestic well group meeting, I had asked that there be some kind of a reporting, an anonymized reporting on the well data, similar to what we received maybe in our last meeting, where we had an overlay of the DWR Gamma website, so that those of us that are on the committee and even members of the public that are interested in understanding not just their own water levels, but the health of the basin or the overall water management in the basin can be part of this well monitoring. I had felt in joining this committee that this was going to be, a public committee. And, we're not asking for who owns the well or where the well is exactly located. We're really looking at anonymized data. I guess they've added, 30 or 34 people now are in that data bank. And I mean, I think that those of us on the committee have asked for the information, we're interested, and probably this is something that we should be distributing to the broader public. I mean, this is not private information. This is data that's being collected, for a public agency. I mean, am I missing something here? I mean, could somebody clarify? I mean, why we can't look at some kind of a very a very anonymized look at what the water levels are? I mean, yeah.
Chris, is that something you can respond to?
Yeah, we did it. I mean, it was done before. It was provided by the committee. I mean, are we actually are we all one committee, or is this well monitoring group working under some other charter or doing something different? I mean, I'm not feeling that we're really coordinated in our efforts in, sharing the data, the responsibility, the idea.
I see Todd's maybe able to
Yeah,
respond. Go ahead.
I've been thinking this a while, and I appreciate Suzanne saying that. I really think the well monitoring program, the data needs to be part of the model, needs to be utilized and provided. And whether it's, every well's needed for every, model run. But I think way earlier we talked about going in and verifying well information by, TVing it or whatever. Like, yeah, the more you can get the model dialed, the better any of the scenarios that we want to run where the real money is very important. So I appreciate Suzanne bringing this, because I've taken this for a while. Like, it really needs to be given to whoever needs it to use it. So I agree.
Well, and this also really coordinates with Barbara Evoy's, comments on shallow wells. A lot of these wells are along the Deer Creek and the Consumnes River, and they can be really helpful for a lot of different interests in the subbasin. I mean, I don't ever feel that, this was ever going to be private. And, I really hope that Todd will work with this group to make this more public. I'm not saying names and addresses. I'm saying a very simple anonymization, a dot on a map within 5 miles of where the well is. But we need to start getting the rest of the community involved, not just the people collecting the data, not the 30 or 34 people that are having the
So Suzanne, I'm going to jump in real quick. I'm going to take an action item to follow up on this. Maybe we can convene a separate discussion. I think the group has heard the concern, and it sounds like there's a lot of agreement. Chris Hunley, did you have something else you wanted to add to this?
No, Lisa, I appreciate you putting a pin in this, and then we can circle back on it. I think there's a lot of discussion to be had on this, and we're at 4:55, but appreciate all of the effort and the energy around this.
Right. So that's the main reason I'm cutting it off, Suzanne, because we don't have enough time to treat it properly. So we will, we did discuss, everybody's got another meeting. Given the budget and given this and a few other topics, I'm going to suggest maybe we're going to meet sooner than later, and we can maybe talk about that. So I don't mean to cut you off, excepting for my concern about time at this point. So thank you. Let me go ahead and move to the next item then, and that is an update on the interbasin coordination. And Eric, I had you first for this one.
Sure. So there's a couple different levels of interbasin coordination. What Sac County and NDGSA are doing is direct communication between the two managers groups, making sure that the key issues in the South American subbasin are relayed across. And then as things are evolving, the South American's a little bit different place in terms of their project management actions and DWR funding. We'll bring those back to this group. But I'd be happy to pass on to Sac County.
Thank you. And so for Sac County, Austin, are you going to make that report?
I won't add too much. I'll just say that in the Solano Subbasin, that group did receive one of the DWR grants similar to the North American Subbasin, and have been doing some great work on a variety of different things, including like what Eric mentioned, and doing some additional like well inventory efforts. So we have a neighbor that is kind of asking and going through a lot of the same things that we continue to discuss as far as trying to understand well impacts. So we'll be sure to keep folks updated on that. And I think Brittany Ozano is going to give a brief update on the Kasumna subbasin. I'll defer to her.
Go ahead, Brittany.
Hi there. Yeah, great meeting. Everyone said a lot of good stuff, so thank you. Just quick update for the Kasumnas subbasin. You know, we're also looking into you know, going over our GSP plan and you know the budget associated with that. So this has all been very interesting. We're conducting our semi-annual groundwater monitoring at the moment, trying to use that data to improve our models. We are at least Slough House is also looking into the stream gauge application from CalCit. So we're working on that. And we're also finalizing our member contribution agreements. I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anything, but I think that's everything.
Thank you, Brittany. Anybody have questions regarding the update on the interbasin coordination? Okay. Next item is your next meeting. So you normally meet in the spring. What's normally been happening, and I say normal as if it has been happening for years, which of course it hasn't. However, in a couple years past, in the time frame, the annual report is being developed, and as soon as it becomes available, one of the things that happens is that the John or some of the team typically go out and make presentations to the individual GSAs about the annual report so that there is a normal annual report process. You have been meeting just prior to the final submission, which is in April. And so that's why I've put out the whole calendar here. It sounds like we do have some additional work in addition to looking at what's going on with the annual report, that you'll also be interested in revisiting the discussion about the budget. And as you heard, there's also some information about the domestic wells that you'll probably want to have on your agenda. So I'm just looking for some guidance. Once again, you'd normally be looking around the March timeframe for a meeting. I can send out a doodle poll, but just wanted to go over this. Did folks have any impressions about this?
Hey, Lisa, can I weigh in?
Please.
I think probably late January, early February, we probably need a meeting to discuss the fiscal year 25-26 budget again. You know, as we move through the spring, each GSA is going to be looking at you know, setting its budget for that fiscal year. So we're going to have to get ahead of that curve. And figure out what that contribution amount for the GSP update is from each GSA. So I don't think we can go too long without at least getting back together, circle back on it.
Okay, well, I can certainly circulate to the group. John, do you see a need for them to meet additionally prior to the submission of the April annual report, or do you see that just being addressed in this meeting, or do
Oh,
we?
I guess I would see if we couldn't get to some resolution on that budget, needed to then potentially meet again. But I don't think this group meeting around the annual report is really that critical. You know, it was just a good time to have some information to update. But I feel like the budget going into next year is much more important. You know, we can't this year. You know, it's October and we just approved the budget for this current fiscal year, and we, you know, a quarter is already passed. And you know, we just can't get behind the curve next fiscal year. And you know, we're going to need to hit the ground running in July, or even some of the work even before that, in order to get it done in that year time frame.
Very good. Herb?
So I kind of agree with John. January, the last week of January, you know, I agree that you can't let this keep on getting behind the curve.
Okay.
And
Well,
the sooner you meet, the better off you are.
if everyone could look at their calendars right now and just let me know if you have pretty good general availability for January, I can go ahead and send out a doodle poll on that. So just let me know. And you can put that in the chat for me. Just let me know if you've got pretty good. Does anybody have a concern with that week? I'll start there. That's usually easier.
I don't.
Okay. I don't see any concerns with that week. Go ahead, Dahlia.
Oh, I was just gonna say, sorry, which week in January are we talking about?
Which the proposals for the
Last week.
week of January.
Okay, yeah. No, looks good.
Yeah, last week of January.
Okay, I'll go ahead and try to. I'm looking at my calendar real quick also. Yeah, that works. Okay. So we'll plan. I'll go ahead and put out a doodle poll then for that last week of January. I'm going to go ahead and schedule us for 2 hours for this next meeting. Does that work for people?
I'm fine.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, yeah, we just ran out of time for this particular meeting. So we will plan on that. For the next agenda then, we'll probably know even more about SB 552 and the drought task force. So we'll put that back on the agenda. We'll plan on working on the budget. We will follow up on this domestic well conversation. Are there other items that you would all like to see on the agenda for the next meeting?
We can add them right?
Yes, you can certainly add. So I'll go ahead and just kind of put that out there in terms of topics. By then, probably too, we might have some discussion about the newsletter that that Mark's talked about. Okay.
Great.
So Austin, thank you so much for preparing a beautiful presentation that we didn't show.
All good. I think it'll be more relevant in January when we have a little bit more in the drought plan. But if anyone does review the slides and has any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Very good. All right. Well, with that, good of the order. Does anyone have anything else they want to put into the mix for this conversation today? All right, and I'm not seeing any. All right, I think we can probably let you go. So I thank everybody for your time and good effort. I do see Chelsea's on the line. Chelsea, did you have anything you wanted to add from DWR today? On mute with her too. Okay, I'm going to let everybody go. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks,
Thank
Lisa.
you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.